All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Wayfind Marketing Live, where we know that marketing can be challenging and we want to make it easier. So we want to encourage and equip you, small business owners and nonprofit leaders, to have the tools that you need to grow your business. And so my name is Steve Phipps. I'm the president of Wayfind Marketing, and I am joined by Annie Laurie Walters. Annie Laurie, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm good.
Good.
Well,
We've been doing this really great Q&A session. We started last Friday answering some frequently asked questions that we often receive from clients or just people that we know that run small businesses. And they're like, hey, I got this question about marketing. Can you just, give me a quick answer? We thought, hey, let's do some shows on this because these are the questions people really want to know. And so we covered a bunch last week and we still have many more to cover. So with that said, I think we should just dive right in. Does that sound good to you?
yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Well, we get a lot of questions about email. A lot of people want to know about email and how to do email marketing well. There's a lot of different conceptions, preconceived notions about email and its effectiveness. And I know you've mentioned previously on shows, email's not dead. It's still a very effective way to reach your current customers and new customers. So why don't you just sort of unpack that at a deeper level for us and talk about different ways we can use email in our marketing strategies?
Yeah, absolutely. Be glad to. So I want to talk about 3 ways to use email marketing. And as you already mentioned, periodically an article comes out or somebody will sort of make the statement that email's dead or email's dying. Well, people have been saying that for a long time, and email is not dying. Email is still one of the most effective ways to market to people. The challenge with email is that everybody's inbox is getting flooded. And so it's creating content that's compelling that people actually want to read. So if your email is boring, people won't read it. So 3 different ways that email can be used. And so number 1 is a sales email. Now there's 2 ways I'm going to talk about how to use this. This will be 2 of the three ways overall. Number 1 is create a sales funnel. Give people an option of something to do on your website, something they can download. It could be a PDF, it could be a checklist, it could be an infographic, something that they can do. Maybe depending on what you do, you provide them with some sort of a discount if they give you their email address. Well, once they give you their email address, then what you want to do is send them a series of emails. And so those emails are designed to continue sharing helpful, useful information. But ultimately, the goal of those emails is to get that person to take the next step in the sales process. So if that's schedule a meeting or, take a demo of your software, whatever that is, each of those emails, and that sequence, is generally going to be 5 to 7 emails. And if you want a really good breakdown of those emails, 1, you can schedule a call with me, or get the book Marketing Made Simple by Don Miller. He goes through different kinds of emails that go into that campaign. Now, another way to use a sales email is if you have a list, you have existing customers, do a periodic email that invites them to try out a new service, or if you're introducing a new service, or maybe you have some sort of a discount, or, again, there's a lot of different ways to do that, but being intentional to communicate with your audience and inviting them to do business with you. Now, a third kind of email is a nurture email. Now, this is something that's it's not as assertive as a sales email. And again, that's not to say a sales email needs to be obnoxious. It can be done well. But a nurture email is designed to build relationship. So let's go back to the very first example. Let's say somebody comes to your website and you have something there, some sort of a downloadable offer that they sign up for. They're not ready to, whatever the next big step is, they're not ready for that yet. So they give you their name and email address in exchange for a resource that they would find helpful. Well, once they get done with that initial sales email campaign, you're going to have a lot of people that don't do anything. They're still on your list, but they didn't respond. Well, a way to stay in front of them is having some sort of ongoing recurring email that continues to share useful, helpful, informative information. Maybe it's maybe you have a weekly blog post and you share that. Maybe you do some sort of video or a newsletter. Maybe it's something that you do once a month, but it's some sort of content that's useful. It's helpful. We do a weekly marketing tip. StoryBrand, if you're familiar with Donald Miller and StoryBrand, they do a weekly email that lets you know who's been on the podcast, and they'll share links to other articles. And so it's okay to have a call to action in that email. But again, the main thrust of that is communicating something that's helpful, it's useful, it's informative. And the reason why that's important is, and we've talked about this in previous shows, the timing of when somebody's ready to do business with you is going to vary. Some people might be the ideal customer. They might check off all the boxes, but they're not ready. It's not the right timing. And so having something like that nurture email is a really good way to stay in front of them. And even if they don't open your emails, or maybe they just open 1 out of 4, just the fact that you're hitting their inbox is still that reminder that you're there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, you make a good point about whether or not they opened your email. Like, there's a lot of reasons why someone may or may not have opened your email. And even still, there's the consideration of, is this email you're sending them even hitting the right folder? Because a lot of folks use Gmail or G Suite, and sometimes Gmail decides for you what you're going to see, whether you like it or not. I think a message I sent you went into your spam folder just this week.
Yeah,
and that can be really frustrating when you're trying to, run email marketing campaigns, just knowing that's an issue. So I think that maybe we can even recommend adding some wording in those initial emails that say something like, mark this important, do whatever you need to do for your email client server to make sure you're getting this email,
Yeah. And again, that goes back to having content that people want to engage with, and then reminding them, hey, you know what, sometimes these things can get routed off. And a couple other points I'll just springboard off of what you just said. Mm-hmm. is there's a couple of factors. Again, with email, you want to make sure that people, one, are seeing it. So you want to look at what tools you're using to send emails. So there are a lot of really good programs. You have programs like MailChimp, ActiveCampaign, HubSpot. I mean, there are dozens of different email marketing tools, and their job is to make sure that the emails are getting through, the deliverability rates. So that's one thing, is make sure you have a good marketing tool. But another thing is make sure that you use good headlines, because that is going to be the deciding factor as to whether or not somebody's going to read your email. And don't just go with, weekly newsletter. If your subject line is weekly newsletter, you're not going to have great open rates, because I don't know what's inside of that. Right. So use really good attention grabbing subject lines. Now, I know of a scenario in the past where some guys they sort of doing, we'll just call it rogue email marketing. And they would have a really attention grabbing subject line. But when you open the email, it really didn't have a direct correlation. It was more of clickbait. And so you use something that's interesting. Use a question, make a statement that raises curiosity. And CoSchedule is a marketing content platform. They have a tool that's an email subject line analyzer. You can use that to get some feedback. But again, and then if you have a good marketing tool, you can A/B test your subject lines. And the way that works, I
love A/B testing. It's always fascinating, because typically what you don't think is going to be the successful headline is the successful headline. And
sometimes you're right. I mean, sometimes it's so the way that works is an A/B test creates 2 versions of the email. And the simplest thing to test is your subject line. And so good marketing tools, what they'll do is they'll send an email, version A and version B, to a certain small percentage of your mailing list. So say 20%. And then depending on which subject line has more opens, that's what gets sent to the remaining 80%. So that way you're maximizing your opens. So anyway, you need a good marketing tool, a good email tool. Look for A/B testing, come up with good subject lines, and have content that's worth reading.
I've talked to people who just think, oh, well, my email marketing isn't working because no one opens my emails. But I think a lot of times it's because of that subject line, and it's just one of another, 1,000 that are just weekly newsletter, monthly newsletter. They aren't giving the reader anything to compel them to click on it and open it up. But the problem is, I think sometimes people approach the content. They need to rearrange the way they're approaching the content. And instead of just writing all their email content and then being like, oh, and now I got to come up with a great headline, maybe start with the headline. Maybe let that be what leads you into the rest of your content. I think that might be, if you're feeling stuck with your email marketing, particularly with the content, start with the headline, go on CoSchedule, headline analyzer, find the one that's the highest rated and let that be the first thing you do, and then let the content follow. That might get you out of a rut.
Yeah. And there's creating content that's a, well, and so why don't we, let's jump over, because we're talking about content. Yeah. Let's talk about blogging for a little bit, because I know people have questions about blogging. So what are some of the questions that we've,
yeah, well, here's a great one that kind of combines both email and blogging. There were some questions about people who have signed up to get my blog. So say this company has a blog, and people are getting the blog via email, but this company is not doing any email marketing. They're just blogging. They're writing a blog, they're hitting publish, and then the people who've subscribed are automatically getting that. They're not really leveraging this list of emails for any intentional purpose for like sales. So what's a way they can transition that email list from just, hey, we get the blogs you post, to this is a proactive strategy?
Sure. So the first thing I would encourage them to do is look at who's on the list. Is there a way to segment who's on that list? Because depending on what a company's products or services are, it might be that not everybody on that list would be your target audience for a particular service. But try to identify who's on that list as much as possible. But then just create some sales emails. If people have opted in and they're opening, they're not opting out, then hopefully you're sharing something that they're finding helpful, useful, informative, and go ahead and send something periodically. I mean, you don't want to send a sales email every week. So let's say that's a weekly blog. And so people are getting that email once a week. Hey, here's our latest blog post. And that's a valid way to again, that goes back to that idea of having a nurture email and creating content that you're using in multiple places. That can actually be something we can talk about in just a few minutes, of making sure that you're also translating that content over to social media. But, send an occasional sales email, send a case study. Hey, here's someone that we recently worked with. This was the challenge they were facing, and here's how we helped them solve that problem. Here are the services that we used and leveraged. Does this sound like something that you've faced? If so, let's schedule a call. And if you create resources, that could be another, again, sometimes when people create some sort of downloadable offer, checklist, a guide, a cheat sheet, whatever it might be, if you have an existing list, send it out to them, let them know that you've got it.
Yeah.
But really it's sitting down and being intentional. Say, okay, who's on our list? What's something that we could communicate to them that would be valuable? And just plan it out.
Yeah. Well, on the other hand, you've got the people who have no blog but are sending out a weekly newsletter, and they want to start blogging, but they're not even sure where to get started. Like, I know that we may do a whole show on blogging and that content marketing, but could you give it at the high level? How do you get started with blogging?
So, it's with anything where we start with the strategy. Start with a plan. Who is your customer? Who is it that you're writing to? And really what you're doing is you're creating content to help answer questions. Be the expert, be the guide. We talk about that a lot. That is the business, is the brand, as a nonprofit. you have a unique role to help your customers. You can help them overcome problems. You can help make their life better in some way, form, or fashion, make things easier, take some stress away. And so think through, who is my audience? What's valuable to them? Then, a simple way to get started with blogging is list out all the questions that your customers ask, your prospects. What are the questions that they are asking? And when we think about the stages of relationship, the stages that somebody goes through from the very first point of contact, first time they're on your website, the first time they start looking for a solution to their problem, all the way through to them becoming a customer, they're asking questions. And so the initial questions that they're asking, it's kind of like going to a doctor. And, so for instance, I've had an issue with my foot here recently. And so I started out just doing some, swollen toe. And so started doing some research to try to at least identify, well, depending on what you do, they might be searching for something that's more topical. And so create blog posts around that. What are those questions that they're asking? Well, then as they get further into the sales process, then maybe they're comparing you to your competitors. So you could write some content around that. They have questions about, well, how does your pricing work? Or how do you do this? Or how do you do that? Great. Well, write a blog post about it. Answer those questions. And what that does is that creates content that you can use in your sales process. You can share that with people. And also that's content that over the course of time can get picked up by the search engines and ultimately can help bring in more traffic. In fact, we have a client who we've been doing their blogging for the better part of 2.5 years. And we were reviewing content with them about a week ago, and we were looking at the analytics. And what we found is that there's a blog post that we wrote, 18 months ago?
Yeah, quite a while.
And it's ranking number 1 for that particular search term. And there's a niche that they're in, and they're getting leads from that blog post that we wrote 18 months ago. So when you're blogging is a long-term strategy. Yes, it can definitely help drive some traffic, but writing a blog post doesn't necessarily mean you're going to see an immediate bump in traffic a week from now. It's a long-term play. And the other thing that's important too is, so make that list of questions and then create some content around that. Based on what the search engines value, I'd say try to write blog posts that are north of 1,000 words, because that's.
Yeah, well, we've done the research, and it's in Google. Well, they don't tell you exactly what their search engines are crawling for, but all the SEO experts have said that you need to be north of 1,000. Like you need to be closer to 2,000, but that's kind of overwhelming if you're getting started. If you can, if you're hitting 800 to 1,000 and you're just getting started, that's pretty good. But one thing that's so important too to inject here is that, we're talking about answering questions that people would have, because it's going to help you get more sales and leads. It's going to help the search engines find your content, because that's the kind of stuff that the search engines are looking for. But the problem is that still a lot of people, when they come to approach blogging, they're still writing from the sense of their own, like they're the hero. The business is the hero. You have to add and apply that story brand framework to the content that you're creating and make the customer the hero. You're answering their questions so that they can be the hero and they can win the day. So that's a hard transition that when I've worked with people one-on-one with just how do I get my content out of this is my personal journal into this is content that can produce leads and sales. It's a transition of thought. You're not writing about yourself and what you think and all your opinions. You're answering questions that other people have. And that's a change of mindset that people have to embrace and practice writing in that way, because it's different than if you're used to blogging in a way that's like, if you're an influencer, you have that luxury of just writing whatever you think. But if you're trying to build that platform, you can't start that way. A lot of times you've got to start with the customer centric content.
And another point, you make a really good point there. You want to write in a way that helps your customers, your prospects, your audience, understand how they benefit from whatever you're talking about. Again, a blog is not a sales pitch. A blog is you sharing useful, helpful information. Now, there's an intersect. It's okay to refer to your services. I'll tell you, a company that does a fantastic job with their content is REI. And, we're maybe you've heard me talk about this in previous shows or my weekly marketing tip video, but I'm in the middle right now training for a backpacking adventure. And so we've been getting a bunch of content from REI, and what you'll see is on their blogs or their videos, they share really great information, but they also link to their related products. So the blog is not just information. That's a big part of it, but it's okay to link to your services. It's okay. Include a call to action, invite people to take the next step. But if that should be, 10% of your content, 90% of it should be good, helpful, useful, informative content. And the other thing too, so 2 other quick notes. I know we're already 20 minutes. I think we'll go a little bit long today, but, think about, so make a plan, sit down, list out the questions, put it on a calendar. This week, I'm going to write about this. This week, I'm going to write about this. But also know what your competitors are writing about. What are they doing? Because we talk about this concept of blue ocean, red ocean. Red ocean is, if you think about a bunch of sharks in a feeding frenzy, well, the water is just going to be red. And so that's where all the competition is. It's where all the noise is. It's hard to stand out there. But blue ocean is that place where there's really not any other competitors. It's still relevant for your audience, but it gives you an opportunity to create content. Again, it's useful, helpful, informative, but it's with a different voice, or maybe there's a different angle than what your competitors are doing. Or you may be in an industry where, your competitors, they're blogging sporadically, or it's been 18 months since their last blog post. And so it might be that standing out isn't that difficult, but so know what they're doing and think through. I always like to look at content a quarter at a time. That doesn't always work out to where, sometimes we look at it more in a month at a time, just depending on the client. But, again, think through. And, case studies are a great blog post.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah, they really are. I know we're going to have to do a whole show on content, because we have so much we can say about content. Because you said, you got to be consistent, don't be the one who's only posting once every 18 months.
You can only blog once a month, Right. You can only do it twice a month, do it twice a month. But yeah, be consistent, be predictable.
Yeah. Because people will forget you. They will write you off if they don't think that you're taking it seriously. They're not going to take what you're saying seriously. But before we jump, because we've only, we're trying to keep it 30 minutes today. What about social media?
Yeah.
So we've talked email, we've talked blogging at a high level, but I feel like email, blogs, and social media, they're like these hinges that all fit together. And when you can get all 3 of those really strong and working well together, you can see some real results. So social media.
Absolutely. So if we think about sort of a Venn diagram, and that's the one that has 3 circles that overlap in the middle. Yeah, I think those are the 3 parts of that Venn diagram is email, blogging, and social media. So again, go back to, you want a plan. You want to have something in mind. Who are you writing to? What's the content that you're sharing? What are the questions that you're trying to answer? What are you trying to ultimately do? Well, social media, of course, is a key part of that. So one of the questions that we hear is, where should I be on social media? Should I be on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, TikTok, all these other places? And really what the 2 ways that I answer that for people when they ask me that question is, number 1, where's your audience? Well, we do a lot of work with a lot of B2B companies. So LinkedIn is the default social media space for B2B. Well, then, Facebook is usually a number 2 because so many people are on Facebook.
Right.
Well, if your audience is a younger audience, Gen Z and millennials and things like that, well, maybe Snapchat's where you need to look. But again, it's context. The other thing is, how much can you manage? Because again, if you're doing it all yourself, or if you've got somebody on your team, you don't want to commit to doing more than what you're actually capable of doing. So if you can only do 2 social channels consistently, creating content, posting a few times a week, then do 2. Right. Don't worry about all the other channels. Be good on the channels that you're on. The other thing is, when you're creating content, look for ways to reuse and repurpose content.
Oh, yes.
Because if you think about all the channels on which we live and exist and communicate, again, there's all the social channels, there's email, there's websites and the blogging, but then, there's texting. I mean, we're bombarded. Our team uses Slack. So there's all these different channels. So don't assume that just because you put something into an email, and then if you put that on social media, don't be worried about overloading people, because chances are that they're not going to see it in both of those places. And even if they do, it's great. It's repetition, which that's a big part of marketing, is getting the same message consistently communicated to an audience until it registers. Mm-hmm. And so with your social, one of the approaches is when you think through your blogging, maybe you take a quarterly campaign, you have a particular focus for that quarter, and you're building your blogging content around that. Well, one way to create social media is for each blog post, create 3 to 4 social media posts, and then schedule those out over the course of, 3, 4, 5, 6 months. And that way you're bringing people back to that blog post. So that's another way to use social media. Yeah. But yeah, and again, we could.
Yeah. I was going to point out too that you might also think about, depending on your industry and what it is that you're offering clients, some of the channels might be more of like engagement, and some might be more driving. Like we talk about drivers and engagers. A lot of times for probably the majority of brands, Instagram, TikTok, places like that, that's really just going to be engagement. That's building your brand so that when they see you on Facebook or on LinkedIn, they already have a favorable impression of you. They know the personality of your company. They know, what your brand's about. And so like that's, you're laying the groundwork. It's more creative, honestly, and it's laying a groundwork, but it makes an impression so that then when they're further along in the process, ready to be more serious about a sales decision, they're already going to have a favorable impression of you because of the impact you made engaging them on some of these other more creative mediums. But then on LinkedIn and Facebook, that might be where you run the ad that they're going to finally click on, and you're going to start to, take them down a funnel. So,
yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point, that social media there's different ways it can be leveraged, but at its heart, its core, social media is about engagement. It's about building trust and credibility, relatability, and, content needs to be good. It's yes, you want to be there. There is a certain quality. The weekly marketing tip that we shared this week on Tuesday, if you missed it, just go to our website, wayfindmarketing.com, look at resources, and there's a link to the weekly marketing tip. Don't be boring. There's a lot of social media that just it's boring. People aren't going to pay attention to it. So no boring social media. And that doesn't mean that, everything is just like super exciting, but you can share content, you can create social media, and create blogs and emails that are interesting. Be interesting. Share something that's relevant. And sometimes that's experiment. You've got to try different things and see what connects with your audience and what doesn't. But, so again, you go back and actually, we'll put that in the show notes. We'll put a link to that because it's a 2-minute video. I give a quick little structure, problem, solution, success with how you can create social media content that's interesting.
Yeah. So, great. Well, this is so fun. I'm looking forward to more Q&A discussions around these topics in a few weeks, but we have a little surprise for the next couple of weeks. Do you want to tell them about that?
Yeah, so we're gonna take a little bit of a rest over the next couple of weeks, and so next Friday, the next 2 Fridays, we're gonna do some reruns. So earlier in when we were getting started with Wayfind Marketing Live, one of the things we did is we did some interviews, and we're gonna have more of those coming in the future, but 2 of the ones that really are kind of our favorites and the ones that really got a lot of really good feedback. One was with John Carroll. So if you're in the Memphis area, he leads city leadership, and he's the guy behind Choose 901. So that's a really fascinating story about how that got started, and just some really good thoughts and ideas on innovating. And right now, a lot of people are trying to innovate. So we've got that. And then the other is Janet Cardona, who leads BNI, Business Networking International, here in the Mid-South. And so we talk about how to network. What does that look like now? Because there's very few networking events, or at least in-person events. And so some ideas on how to get it, how to connect, how to use Zoom and tools like that. And so that's going to be the next 2 weeks. And then we'll be back here in 3 weeks. We're back and live, and we're going to wrap up August with some more Q&A, or we're going to dive more into blogging. We're going to dive more into social media. We're going to dive more into email, because there's so much there, and there are tons of questions. And so we want to give you the information that you need to encourage and equip you, make marketing easier, so that you can grow your business, get to focus on the parts of what you do that you really enjoy. And so thanks so much for joining us today. Keep an eye out. We will post this recording. This will be available on YouTube, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and we also turn this into a podcast. So you find us on Apple, Google, Spotify. I can't remember all the places where we are now, but just if you just search for Wayfind Marketing Live, you'll find us. You'll find episodes. So thanks, everybody, and enjoy your weekend.
Bye.